The look of utter confusion on your face. I don't know that I've ever seen this before.
We were there to ask the difficult questions, the uncomfortable questions.
I know exactly where this is. I think I'm probably just off camera here.
No way. And someone asked me recently, like, but journalists, do they really need to be speaking out? Journalists are there to witness history, but how can you observe history if you're dead? Where is the history?
All right. So let me do the intro. I think everybody knows who this is, but let me just, as a formality, let me do the intro. Hind Hassan, the multi-Emmy award-winning international correspondent and documentary filmmaker, covers conflicts, humanitarian crises. You've almost certainly seen her work embedding with the Taliban in Afghanistan just months before they took over Kabul. I know I've interviewed you previously about the exploitation of poor communities in Africa by multi-million-dollar American wellness companies. You've reported in Ukraine, Gaza. I could keep going. Your site is hindhassan.co.uk, which I just love that it's .uk. I don't know why that that does something to me.
Somebody, somebody took the .com.
Is that what it
I don't
is?
know. Yeah, so
Simple,
we had
simple
to
as
go
that.
with the co.uk. Yeah. And just in case people didn't know that I was British, we just really needed to put it
Just look,
in the website.
lean into it. Lean into it.
We did.
Um, I'm so happy to be talking to you again. How you doing?
I'm good, man. As good as can be in, the world that we live in. And yeah,
Yeah.
really good to be here. And it's been a while since we've spoken. I mean, we've messaged every now and then, but I've missed you.
Same, same. That is a lot of people in our sphere, or maybe just everybody's communication recently. I know a lot of our messages have been about like, damn, this bad thing happened. How you holding up? It's a lot of that.
Going on in the world. So that's always there, whatever we're doing. And then on top of that, a lot of people are dealing with the issues that we have in our industry, from whether it's funding, whether it's, like having existential crisis with journalism in general. There's just so many different layers to it. And so it does feel as though those are the conversations that we tend to be having with our friends, especially those who are, fellow journalists.
Well, yo, let's jump right into it. Let's
Yeah.
jump right into it because there is truly truly a lot to get to. So let's just play the first bit here.
October 2023, 2 weeks into the Gaza genocide. One of the world's largest weapons companies, General Dynamics, is holding its quarterly call with investors.
Israel, Hamas has created, additional demand. We have this 106 billion request from the president. Can you give us some general color in terms of areas where you think you could see incremental acceleration in demand?
The forecast for the American corporation is looking good.
The Israel situation obviously is a terrible one, frankly. But I think if you look at the incremental demand potential coming out of that, the biggest one to highlight and that really sticks out is probably on the artillery side.
In other words, more conflict means greater profits. And there's never been a better time to be in the business of war.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about this whole series and especially about this episode.
So this is a four-part series, as you saw there, called The Business of War. It's very different to some of the stuff that I've done previously. So very often in our news documentaries, we go on a journey, we're focusing on one specific thing. We'll go to a location and talk about that. This is delving into an idea, and it takes us all across the world actually. And we're looking at that relationship, the close relationship between those big businesses and money and the war industry. And so this particular episode is about that about that relationship specifically. There's four episodes in total. There's the military industrial complex episode, this one. Then we had one on nuclear weapons, one on drones, and then the final one, which is airing this week on Al Jazeera, is about the militarization of police. And in that episode, there's actually quite a lot of traveling for that one. We went to Bangladesh, we went to the UAE, we went to France to the May Day protests, and we look at how the police forces are, how they're being armed, what weapons they're using against their own civilians, and why that's happening. And so each episode has that current that thread, and we go on a search for. We try and find out things, and we also go on a search for accountability. So in this particular episode, we go to the Senate and we try and speak to some of the politicians about where their money is coming in from, where their funding is coming from, for their campaign donations, and try and get some answers as to whether there's any conflict of interest when you're receiving millions of dollars from weapons companies, and your job is to be neutral or to vote on how much your military should be funded, or how much defense funding there should be. And so, yeah, it was um, different to what I've previously done. And I had like a really, really great team that I worked with that I have to, shout out. And they were absolutely brilliant. There's a lot of people that worked on this behind the scenes, the executives and the senior producers, and people who worked on archive, getting all of that information up. It really, really was a huge team effort to put this together.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have seen, your work, especially when we were, I guess, colleagues at Vice, and a lot of your work really throws you right into something. And I mean, throws you physically, the person, you're right into something, but then also kind of throws the viewer right into something. And this is a series that steps back a lot, I think, and it gives a lot more historical context, which is to say that kind of by design, a lot of the work that, or by necessity, a lot of the work that you do, you're reporting on things that a lot of people may not be as familiar with. And so you need to explain something, right? But this does so even more. I just want to play the next little bit here because it shows specifically what we're dealing with.
The BLU-109, which is manufactured by General Dynamics. These bombs are designed to explode after they penetrate hardened targets, like underground facilities or fortified concrete buildings. And so Israel has used bunker buster bombs to destroy residential areas by hitting concrete buildings from the top all the way to the foundation of the building.
So this set of graphics here, I think at this point, for better, for worse, definitely probably for both, you've probably seen pictures of something blowing up, but you may not exactly understand how it is or why it works like that. And I mean, just even seeing this graphic, realizing that, oh, it's meant to be able to penetrate all of these layers. And then once it has done that, then it blows up. But yeah, like the actual diagramming out of this, I feel like, is something for me, having watched a lot of your work.
Yeah.
This sort of level of explanatory, hey, this is precisely how this sort of thing works.
Yeah.
It
And it was for me. Yeah, it was for me. I went on a journey with this. Like you said, most of our reports is going to places and seeing things. So even before we started filming on this, I had just come back from Lebanon this year for another documentary called Made in America. And that was for our Fault Lines platform. And we went to the south of Lebanon. Israel and Lebanon had been in a war as well. The south of Lebanon had been, parts of it had been significantly hit and destroyed, and civilian areas had been attacked, and there were a lot of civilian casualties. And we met one family. We met Muhammad, who was a young man who lived in the south of Lebanon near a small village. Like his house was isolated, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and his home was destroyed. He was in his house one day. They were planning on leaving because the bombardment was getting heavier and heavier. And so their plan was to go to the capital, Beirut. While he was in his house, him, his mother, and his sister, his father was out. They were hit by an Israeli bomb, and it destroyed the entire building. Like the devastation was insane. He miraculously survived. He was pulled out of the rubble.
Wow.
His sister was killed and his mother was killed. But they never ever found his mother's body. To this day, they have not found a piece of his mother. So that was the fourth of the bomb. And they've had rescue workers, emergency workers, volunteers. He was posting on his social media for weeks, for months even, that he was still looking for his mother and they couldn't find any part of his mother. Now, while we were there, we found some fragments that were in among the rubble, and we took pictures of it and took videos of it, and then we shared it with Air Wars. Air Wars did an analysis of the shrapnel that we found, and they found that it was a BLU 109. They found the bomb was a BLU 109, so a bunker buster bomb, so the one that you've just seen in that video there, and also parts of the shrapnel were also parts of a JDAM, which is a guidance missile system that you attach to the bomb so that you know where the bomb is going to land, which means that precise coordinates would have been put into this JDAM to specifically hit this house. So we know that this house hitting it wasn't an accident. They hit it on purpose with a bunker buster bomb. And so I was there and I spoke to Muhammad and I saw what happened to his house, the devastation it had caused, and then worked on this next project, which allowed me to just step back and go, why? Where are these bombs coming from? Why are they being used? What did they do? And actually, I would say bunker buster bombs, my first memory of the term bunker buster bomb was not even the Iraq War. It was before then, the Gulf War, when the US bombed an Iraqi, it was a bunker. It was an actual bunker for people who were hiding during I think it was the Gulf War. I need to fact check this and double check this. And a bunker buster bomb was used on this bunker, and it killed civilians, lots of civilians, mainly women and children. And there are clips online. You can go on YouTube and you can see people from news networks and this, old footage saying that the US says that they were targeting whether something like maybe a military headquarters, but all we're seeing is, women and children being pulled out. And I remember that at the time because I was born in Iraq and I was young at the time, and I remember watching this because it was such a big deal among Iraqis and on the news. And I remember hearing the term buster bunker bomb over and over again, that these bunker buster bombs were being used. That was all the way in the 90s. And so now with this series, I got to dig into these companies that are making these bunker buster bombs, that are selling them to countries, that are, that the US is giving to Israel to use. And we know for a fact that they have been used in civilian areas. We had our investigation made in America, and you only have to look at Gaza to see the devastation that has been caused by these bombs. And so, yeah, it was a real eye-opener to kind of stand back and explore what these bombs are, what they were made to do, why so many of them were being given to countries that we know have violated international human rights laws. And yeah, it was definitely enlightening.
Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of stepping back, let's step back a little bit. And when you told me, when I said, "Yo, Hind, can I interview you?" legit about anything, and you said, "Oh, let's talk about this one scene here." So I'm gonna play a scene. I'll just play it, and I'll let your narration speak for itself here.
Democratic Senator Tim Kaine. He sits on the same committee as Roger Wicker, and is the second largest recipient of arms industry campaign donations in the US Senate. Do you think that there's a conflict
I
of
have
interest?
not received money.
The donations into your campaign. Do you think there's a conflict?
Campaigns is not me receiving money.
But is there a conflict of interest there?
No.
But is there a conflict of interest at all?
Because I get donations. I probably got donations from 150,000 donors to run for the Senate. So can I not vote on anything that affects any of them?
Voting for bills that benefit your
The way he's like, yeah, you didn't think of that, did you? I mean, he actually spoke to us, which was way more than, most people did not want to have that conversation. So, yeah.
Let's keep going.
Committee, which oversees all federal government spending. Its chair is Republican Senator Susan Collins, who also serves on the subcommittee responsible for the military. She too is a major recipient of campaign donations from the arms industry, but she also has another connection. Her husband owns stocks in 4 weapons firms, including RTX, which produces bunker buster bombs, and Boeing, which makes the guidance systems. That raises the prospect of her family benefiting financially from the increases to military spending that happen under Senator Collins's watch. She's previously disclosed these holdings, so her reaction when I asked her about them was a little unexpected. I just wanted to ask you about your household shares in military companies, and do you think that that's a conflict of interest given your position as the chair of the Appropriations Committee?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Your household shares in RTX and Boeing?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Basically, there are people who have raised concerns about the fact that your household has shares
My household?
Yeah. Your husband has shares in RTX and Boeing? Is that not something that you know about?
I truly don't know. No, I don't know what my husband's holdings are.
You don't know what your husband's holdings are in your household? It's been well reported.
No, we have separated.
It's been well reported.
I don't understand what you're saying.
A spokesperson for Collins says her husband's...
Okay, this is why I wanted to play them back to back, because the look of utter confusion on your face, I don't know that I've ever seen this before.
Yeah.
And I'm glad. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I genuinely, there was a completely natural response to what I just heard. So as we were walking with Senator Collins, I was questioning whether I had the right information. Now, we do so much checking, so much reading. There's, pages of notes and information and sources, and, there's a lot of work that goes into this. And so we don't just randomly find somebody and then say something. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And so when I was asking, I was like, have we got this right? I literally just read this, again, 2 seconds before coming to speak to you. And yeah, it was very clear that it was a tactic to avoid answering that question, because I think from my understanding is Senator Collins was a spokesperson who had released a statement on this before. So it's actually something she's previously acknowledged.
Right.
And so to then have her play completely, dumb, like I have no idea what you were talking about, was very, very confusing.
I still struggle to understand why she reacted like that, because I would be thinking the same thing. Did I accidentally get the wrong person? Is this not even the right senator? Are we speaking to the wrong person? I would be so confused, because she is determined and says repeatedly, I do not know what you're talking about.
I think she was blindsided.
Yeah.
I think the fact, just to give a bit of background information, it's not every day that people are chasing senators down the halls and asking them questions that could be seen as, controversial in their eyes. So there are journalists everywhere who are waiting for politicians, senators, lawmakers to come out of meetings and to be able to put a question to them. Very often it's on the story of the day. So if, Donald Trump has released some new policy or said that he's going to be adding tariffs on whatever country. There'll be journalists located at different committee meetings waiting for a particular person to come out to throw to them a question. But a lot of the journalists who were there, they need to have a relationship with a lot of the senators. They can't piss them off too much, you know? And so if a senator says to them, I don't really want to talk about this, or I don't want to talk about this today, usually they'll respect that. But we were there to get answers because nobody would reply to our emails. Nobody would talk to us on the record about this. We asked plenty of senators to come to us and talk to us about allegations of conflicts of interest from the funding, the donations that they were getting for their campaigns. And they either didn't reply or they said no. And so we were there to ask the difficult questions, the uncomfortable questions. And I don't think Senator Collins has that experience very often. I don't think people are throwing those questions at them, you know, in the halls of the Senate. And so that's why I think perhaps she wasn't prepared with an answer as to how to respond. And very often, a lot of the senators that you saw with Wicker, they might just ignore you. That's why actually with that first interview you saw, I threw a softball question, first of all, you know, why is it important to fund the military? You know, just to get them talking, to show that this isn't a hostile interview, and then hit them with a hard question. But you saw there it didn't work anyway. He answered the first question, and then when the question got difficult, he refused to answer that. And so I think, you know, we were walking together in that situation. There was no way that Senator Collins could avoid me. I mean, she could have stayed silent like a lot of other people did. But instead, she just said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And yeah, I think it was because she was blindsided by me. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing. I think obviously we're seeing the inability of her to answer the question about, look, is there a conflict? You asked the question, we've got a non-answer. I guess my question here is, okay, we've seen that, and we've seen the non-answers from a lot of U.S. politicians. What is to be done now? What should people be thinking about now?
Well, I think for me, it's really wild to think that there are politicians that could be benefiting from being a politician, relationships that they're having with companies and making profits from being a politician. That in any other language or in any other term is, you know, cronyism or corruption. And so it makes no sense to me that this is not something that we're talking about more or we're trying to investigate more. And I think actually it would be really great if you know there was more of a push to be able to put questions forward to some of these senators, for them to be held accountable, for them to respond to questions that we put to them, that there isn't this power dynamic where a lot of the journalists can't push too hard because then they might lose their access or might lose a question or an answer in a different time. But, you know, in terms of what's to be done, it's all about people's voting powers, right? You know, people vote for senators, politicians that have these relationships, and if they want it to stop, then they have to vote a certain way. But you know, that isn't in our hands. That's down to what people decide.
But so this is since you mentioned it, another episode in the series, how police came to look like armies again, and you spend a bunch of time in Bangladesh, and then all of a sudden, middle of the video, it switches, and I'm gonna play this here.
Bangladesh's militarized police force is a legacy of its colonial roots. It was the British who created and armed it to control the local population. That's true of many post-colonial countries where police forces have always been militarized and are now just expanding their toolkits. But over the past few decades, police forces in wealthier parts of the world have also come to look and act more like armies.
I know exactly where this is. So this is LA. Matter of fact, I remember this day. I'm probably I'm probably like I remember seeing this person. I think I'm probably just off camera here.
No way.
Yeah. No, I look, watch, hold on. Okay.
Wow.
Take a look see these buildings here. This is I'm going to show you another day, but see this building here?
Uh-huh.
Same building. This is my
Oh,
footage.
crazy.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. Oh, this is if you were out covering the protests, you know these neighborhoods. This is right outside of Little Tokyo. So actually, weirdly, let me
Mm.
play something real quick.
You just get hit? Wow, I saw that bounce. Oh, shit.
Look how far we are. We're I don't even know, 50 yards, 50 meters, something like that, and they shot again. Anyway, this is something that I've noticed in covering the protests in LA. In the summer of 2020, things were very much focused on, understandably so, the murder of George Floyd, right? And if anybody during the protest was talking about anything else that was happening in the world, and this is speaking strictly as an observer, my sense from watching a lot of protesters was they seemed to think of that as less urgent or something of a distraction. And I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but seeing spray paint about, graffiti about Israel, graffiti about the IDF is something that I was not seeing in 2020. Now, granted, the situation very much has changed, but
Yeah.
obviously, right? And
I
I think
mean,
that's a big
I
factor.
think I think yeah, you have a very specific thing here. So, 2023, what's happened since October 7th, 2023, and the subsequent bombardment of Gaza, and what we've seen, and we know it's very well documented that the weapons that Israel has been using comes mostly from the United States. If something is dropping out of the sky, those planes that are dropping it are from the United States. The bunker buster bombs are from the United States. Just so much of the weaponry that is being used to massacre so many Palestinian children, women, and men is, it's the reason why so many people have resigned from the State Department, because there are many officials who work there who believe that the United States is very clearly complicit in what's happening. And you have, I guess, a government, an administration that continues to have a very, very close relationship with Israel. And when you're seeing you, some of the campaigns for the future mayor election in New York, and one of the main questions is, will you visit the state of Israel? I
Hmm.
think it is, you can't avoid it. You can't avoid that relationship between US politics and Israel in terms of the military industrial complex, in terms of weapons that are used, in terms of what you're seeing on the grounds, in the ground in the US and what's happening elsewhere in the world. I mean, you just showed that clip of during the protests in LA, and what was that thing that was that a sponge tip bullet that landed
Yeah.
nearby?
Hmm.
Right. So those sponge tip bullets are being used by Israeli riot police and the IDF for many years against Palestinians. And they call them sponge tip bullets, but they're actually a very heavy synthetic rubber. And again, some of the misleading things that they call them non-lethal weaponry, but it's only non-lethal if it's shot from a certain distance and below the waist. And even then, it can cause severe injuries. But if you're shot in the head with it, or if you're shot at close distance, then it can blind you, it can kill you, it can maim you. And that's happened, to protesters in France. It's happened to protesters in Palestinian protesters. It's happened to people in the United States. And so what we've seen the use of this kind of the stun grenades, the rubber bullets in places like Jerusalem, in even, to be fair, the yellow vest, the Gilets Jaunes protests, how many years ago, and now we're seeing it more often
Hmm.
on the streets of places like the United States. And so when you have protesters experiencing a similar force and you are also hearing a political connection between these states, then I guess that's more likely to create some form of solidarity between protesters,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah, and I hesitate even to say solidarity necessarily, which I think that is definitely happening. Um, I also think on another level, it's also just something of an increasing awareness, and it could just be watching the news about different things at the same time, and maybe connections start to get made just by virtue of being outside or by virtue of watching it,
Mm.
depending on who your social group is. Maybe the last thing then that I'll ask you about is you wrote about a blackout. So in the Columbia Journalism Review, there's an article entitled "Urgent Ideas for Defending Press Freedom in Gaza," and they asked a bunch of different journalists with varying experiences what could be done as journalists. You had a particular recommendation or idea. What's yours?
Yeah, so just to recap, the Columbia Journalism Review had asked for us to come up with ideas, urgent ideas, because so many Palestinian journalists in Gaza have been killed, and they've continued to be killed, to be targeted in Gaza since from the start, from October 2023, and we have been speaking out. Palestinian journalists in Gaza have been, calling out for support and for help, and yet nothing has changed. There's been no pressure from governments. There's been not enough pressure from our industry. And you've seen a situation where we're waking up to the news that 5 journalists have all been killed in a media tent next to a hospital, and that Al Jazeera's entire, team in Gaza has been wiped out. And so it's just a dystopian situation that we're in, that so many journalists are being killed. And we heard right from 2024, and now we're into 2025, and we're hearing the same thing. This has been the most dangerous conflict for journalists since we started putting information and records together. And
Yeah.
it's just going to continue. Every year is going to be the most dangerous year because we have been unable to stop this. And so what they wanted was ideas as to what we could do to contribute, to try and do something to have an impact apart from obviously the bombs stopping. And so my idea was that, I wonder how many people walking down the street know about what's happening, truly know about what's happening in Gaza. And if you said to somebody, did you know that X amount of journalists have been killed? Did you know that this journalist was killed in this way? Did you know that there have been more journalists killed in Gaza in this period of time than has ever been recorded since we started recording this information? Probably not. I don't think people would have known that. And I just thought that a media blackout, so having a black screen for an hour or whatever, how long it is, that just said journalism is not a crime or explained something concisely that was happening. If we were to have that on our screens, to have that on the networks, to have newspapers with a blank page, I think immediately that would get a message to the wider public as to what our fellow journalists were experiencing in Gaza. And actually, interestingly enough, I think there has been an effort to do a media blackout. RSF has, you might have seen a lot of journalists have been posting a black screen with a message about what's happening in Gaza. So, since this report came out, there has been an effort to do a media blackout, but we need, I think, more networks and more people in the industry to have to do something about it, because it's not really enough for me to sit here and talk about it with you, or for people to post a post on their Instagram or social media, because it just doesn't have an impact. You have to have governments having high level conversations. You have to have the threat of sanctions. You have to have lots of different things to happen for it to truly have an impact. And, someone asked me recently, like, but, journalists, do they really need to be speaking out? Journalists are there to witness history. is that, that it was a thought that somebody had, do journalists really need to be advocating for other journalists? Is that their job?
Right. Shouldn't
And
journalists just be neutral and objective?
right. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation
Of
about what
course.
is neutrality and what's
Yes.
objectivity. We could talk about that all day. We'll save
Yes.
that for the next time. But yeah, they are just observers of history. But how can you observe history if you're dead? Where is the history? We're not observing history. We're allowing journalists to be killed exactly so that history is not observed. And then somebody else pointed this out to me as well recently, like these journalists that have been killed in Gaza, and there are hundreds now, they witnessed so many different moments in the bombardment of Gaza. They witnessed the attack on El Shifa Hospital. They witnessed the flower massacre. They witnessed these moments where so many civilians were killed, were targeted. They witnessed history and now they're dead. And with them is that first-hand observation, the is their knowledge, is our sources for information. And so that's why I always say, what's happening in Gaza is not by accident, it's on purpose. The Palestinian journalists in Gaza, they've been dehumanized and they have been targeted and they have been killed, not by accident. It's on purpose in order to achieve a certain goal. And that is the prevention of information going out. And so therefore, yes, we are the observers of history. That is our job. But if we are killed, then we can't do that. And so, yeah, it's important for us as an industry to speak out more, because a target on their back, it's a target on ours as well. The next time there's another war somewhere else, or there's an attack, or there's a bombardment, or there is whatever it is, and a state could think, well, this is an option for us because we know the world doesn't act and they allow journalists to be killed with impunity and there's no justice. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I just think it's incredibly important to be able to push to do more. And that idea was a very, very simple idea. I mean, it's just a media blackout. Is something that is by itself doesn't do anything either. We need a lot more than that. But
Right.
it was something that I thought would have an immediate, quite substantial impact.
Well, I think what you're talking about here is, say, for example, journalist networks in the US, as an example, recognizing that their colleagues, their Palestinian colleagues, journalists in Gaza, are being killed. This, however, requires that we recognize Palestinian journalists as our colleagues. And I'm not sure that's always happening.
I agree. And I think it's clear because so many of us, right from the beginning, said what's happening is very dangerous. We need to speak out. We were saying this all the way back in October 2023. And now I saw today, and I'm glad that this is happening, but I saw today that The Guardian had, published a list of names of the journalists that had been killed and had done a whole post on it. And I thought, it's good that they've done this. But also, why has it taken so long? It's not that we didn't know. We did know because we were talking about it right from the very beginning. And this isn't new what's happening. Every time there's a bombardment of Gaza, there are offices that are targeted, there are buildings that are targeted. In 2021, the last time that I went to Gaza was in 2021, and there was I don't know if you remember seeing it, but a picture of, I think it was the Reuters building, I can't remember, but Reuters might have been housed in there, but it was attacked, bombed, and it was completely destroyed. And every time there's a bombardment, the entry points into Gaza are closed off. Journalists are not allowed in. Their offices are targeted. There are journalists who've been killed before. So it isn't something that we've just discovered now in September 2025. And but we still, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do more now. And yeah, I think and that's why actually, like I went to Mexico last year, and I spoke to a lot of journalists in Mexico, and they are very often targeted by,
Yeah.
gangs, by the government, and it is incredibly dangerous to be a journalist in Mexico and to continue to do investigative stories. So the journalists there are incredible, some of the people. Marcela Turati, brilliant journalist. I recommend you check out her work. But it it was interesting being there, speaking to the journalists because of their own experiences, how much they kind of related or were so moved by what they were seeing happening to their fellow journalists in Gaza. And it was because they could relate. And I think the problem is that we have a lot of relative safety. So we just can't see ourselves being in a position where we're going to be targeted like that. And so it's not our problem. But it is because, like I said, an increase in the targeting of journalists directly makes our lives, the lives of all journalists, increasingly under threat.
And I think even to bring that back down a little bit, or to bring that back closer, I think there's always that danger of, I hate to put it this way, but privileging journalists over everybody else. You know what I mean? Especially in a situation where a lot of people, understandably, I suppose, don't trust the news, period. And we could have an entirely different conversation about that. But I think it is also important to keep in mind that if something is happening to journalists imagine what is happening to people who do not have a press badge. Imagine what authorities think they can do to people when they think there really truly is no sort of accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hind, thank you so much for coming through. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to leave us with? I know I threw a lot of questions at you. One of these days we're going to have a conversation about something more fun, but I feel like we got to talk about these things.
Thank you for having me. Apologies for the chaotic start of this, but it's been disappointed that we're not going to have time to talk about Oasis, but we'll save that for next time.
We'll put a pin in it next time. Everyone.
I was at Heaton Park. I was there in Manchester. So we'll keep that for next time.
We'll do it. Once again, Hind, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Take care. Thanks.